The silver-wrapped box slid across the antique mahogany dining table, catching the faint, cool light of the chandelier. Inside, a DNA testing kit lay nestled in white tissue. Naomi's laughter, sharp and triumphant, cut through the quiet hum of the room. "Maybe this will explain why you're another man's mistake," she announced, loud enough for the sound to carry down the hall and back. Every fork clattered to a stop. I swallowed, the sudden dryness in my throat mirroring the arid atmosphere of the Ellington home. My mother, Evelyn, visibly recoiled, her carefully constructed composure momentarily shattering before she rapidly refilled her wineglass, her hand trembling. The humiliation was immediate and profound, a calculated strike designed to wound publicly. But beneath the shame, a small, cold curiosity took root. Naomi had weaponized a truth she believed would destroy me. Fine, I would use it to find out what that truth was. I mailed the kit the next morning. The results arrived 5 weeks later in Austin, but the truly terrifying revelation came months after that. An urgent summons from Mr. Dalton, the family's estate lawyer, regarding Grace Ellington's parentage. My mother's face went pale, her lips tightening into a thin, white line. Naomi, usually so expressive, was terrifyingly still, her customary smirk wiped clean, replaced by a look of panicked realization. In that moment, I understood everything. They didn't just suspect, they already knew. The DNA test was merely the final, unwanted confirmation of a secret they had buried decades ago. Growing up in the Ellington house in Denver, family always felt less like a haven and more like a mausoleum, beautifully crafted on the outside, but deathly cold once you stepped inside. I learned early how to exist in the margins. I was the quiet child who excelled in school without needing praise, the one who retreated into corners so as not to provoke my mother's sigh of exhaustion or my sister's open disdain. Naomi's world revolved around attention. She had a dramatic flair, a talent for turning every gathering into her own stage, and Evelyn was her devoted audience. Naomi's C- on a paper made her well-rounded. My perfect score earned a dismissive, "That's nice, Grace. Can you help set the table?" It was not just favoritism, it was a systemic oversight of my existence. By the age of 35, I had built a life tailored to my need for peace. Austin suited me, the quiet streets, the professional discipline of my financial analyst career, the stability that had been perpetually absent in my youth. I dressed in soft, neutral colors and maintained simple routines, hoping to insulate myself from the lingering ache of being the forgotten daughter. The return to Denver was necessitated by the passing of my father, James Ellington. He had been the house's silent anchor, a man of few words, but surprising, unconditional warmth. It was in the small gestures, a hand on my shoulder, a proud nod at my college commencement, that I felt seen. I only later realized the incredible burden of the secret he carried for all those years. 3 months after his quiet funeral, Evelyn insisted on the birthday dinner. Her voice over the phone was brittle, too bright, like thin glass stretched over a fragile frame. When I arrived, the scent of lemon polish and old paper greeted me, but the house felt cavernous without Dad's imposing yet gentle presence. Naomi was there, already suntanned from a recent trip, barely acknowledging me as she flipped through expensive resort brochures. Evelyn drank more wine than usual, her hands never quite steady. A heavy, unspoken tension hung over the dining room like a threat. When I gently broached the subject of the will, Mom stiffened instantly. "We're just not ready, dear," she said, her eyes flicking to Naomi, who smiled a tight, triumphant smile. The dinner wasn't a celebration. It was the prelude to my calculated expulsion. The entire evening felt meticulously staged. Naomi talked nonstop, her high-profile consulting job, her husband's new venture, her plans for a French farmhouse renovation. Evelyn offered automatic, high-pitched laughter at every comment, while my few attempts to contribute were met with silence, the volume of my presence effectively turned down. Naomi's half-question about my job in Austin wasn't meant for information. It was a verbal insertion of her dominance. She saw me as background noise. But beneath her smugness, I saw a coiled anticipation. She and Mom had rehearsed this. When Mom finally stood, a brief reprieve before the climax, Naomi pushed back her chair. "Actually," she said, producing the silver box, "I brought a present, something you'll find enlightening." Evelyn's face instantly lost all color. "Naomi, please," Mom whispered, but Naomi ignored her, sliding the test kit across the table like an indictment. The words, "another man's mistake," hit sharp and deliberate. Mom flinched, terrified, but remained silent, confirming the truth of the insult. Naomi hadn't just humiliated me, she had confirmed a long-held suspicion. Later that night, unable to sleep, I searched my old room. I didn't find the answers in old journals or report cards, but tucked in the back of my closet, I found a small, dusty envelope. It had clearly been handled recently. Inside was a faded photograph, a much younger Evelyn, looking exhausted and scared, holding me as a baby, standing next to a handsome man I had never seen before, a stranger. On the back, in Evelyn's characteristic looping script, "Forgive me." My hands were shaking as I quickly photographed the image and the handwriting. Naomi had wanted me to take the test. She wanted proof. I would give it to her. I needed to know the truth she was so eager to use against me. The DNA results landed in my inbox 5 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. The cold, scientific clarity was undeniable. No biological relationship detected with James Ellington family. My suggested match was to a Hartman lineage, a name that meant nothing to me, yet was now irrevocably tied to my existence. It didn't bring pain, but a profound, cold sense of confirmation. I was, and always had been, an outsider. What truly altered the trajectory of my life was the response to the screenshot I sent to the family group chat. "Does anyone want to explain this?" Mom called immediately, hysterical, yet her sobs were laced not with guilt or apology, but paralyzing fear. "Grace, please delete it. You don't understand. This is complicated. We moved past this years ago." She was terrified of the exposure, not the damage she had inflicted. Naomi, true to form, only texted 4 words, chilling in their satisfaction. "Well, now you know." I called her back, shaking with years of unspoken resentment. "Why, Naomi? Why push this? Why humiliate me publicly?" She laughed, the sound brittle and chilling. "Because I've kept this family secret for 20 years. Because Mom owed me. Because you've played the quiet victim long enough. And now the right people will finally get what they deserve." She hung up. Her final words, "the right people," were a clear declaration of war over the inheritance. The next day, I began my own quiet investigation. Speaking to old neighbors and Dad's distant cousins, a chilling picture emerged. Naomi had been quietly digging for months before the birthday dinner, meeting with junior estate lawyers, hinting to acquaintances about upcoming changes to the will, and acting as if Dad's entire legacy was already destined for her. I realized this was not a family drama. It was an active plot of financial and emotional erasure. I needed professional help. I hired Sarah Ang, a formidable attorney specializing in complex inheritance disputes. I presented her with everything: the DNA results, the cryptic photograph, Naomi's texts, and the evidence of Naomi's months of calculated preparation. Sarah, a woman of sharp intelligence and steady nerves, took meticulous notes. "Your instincts are right, Grace," she concluded, setting down her pen. "This isn't sisterly resentment. This is a deliberate legal maneuver to have you declared non-inheritable. Someone is building a case to erase you from your father's will." 3 days later, Mr. Dalton called. His voice was unusually formal, drained of its usual warmth. "Grace, Your father left instructions for the reading of his will to be triggered under specific circumstances, namely any formal dispute or inquiry regarding your parentage. Those circumstances have now been met. I strongly advise you to be prepared for what you are about to hear. The morning of the will reading, the air in Denver was not merely cold. It was hostile. Sarah and I arrived early at the downtown firm, taking seats strategically near the expansive windows. "Observe everything," Sarah murmured. "Speak only when absolutely necessary. Their reactions are as important as the document itself." Mom arrived next, looking pale and defeated, her expensive clothes wrinkled, her hair hastily pinned. She avoided my eyes and sank into a chair at the far end of the table, staring at the polished wood as though bracing for impact. Then came Naomi. Her heels clicked like a metronome against the marble floor. She was dressed in a pristine cream-colored suit, perfectly tailored, her makeup sharp and aggressive. She brought her own attorney, Mr. Thorne, a loud, billboard-famous litigator known for his ruthless tactics. Naomi offered me a slow, predatory smile. "Grace," she greeted me dismissively, her eyes gleaming with absolute certainty of victory. Mr. Dalton entered last, a thick, old folder in hand. He took his seat at the head of the table with the deliberate calm of a judge. "Before we begin, I want to note that James Ellington left explicit, unambiguous instructions for how this reading should proceed. He anticipated complications." He rested his hand on the file. "Everything I'm about to share was prepared with full knowledge of circumstances that some of you may find surprising." Naomi's smug expression faltered slightly. Dalton opened the file and began reading the official last will and testament. "I, James Robert Ellington, declare this my final will and testament. I leave 70% of my estate, including the family home, all investment accounts and assets, to my daughter, Grace Ellington." The silence in the room was instantaneous and deafening. Naomi shot out of her chair, eyes blazing. "She is not his daughter," she screamed, pointing at me. "We have DNA proof. She has no legal standing as a beneficiary." Dalton held up a hand, his expression immutable. "Please sit. There is more." Naomi, trembling with fury, reluctantly dropped back into her seat. Dalton continued, "I have known since Grace was 2 years old that she is not my biological child. I chose to raise her anyway. I choose to leave her my legacy because she alone has proven worthy of it. This decision requires no further validation." Naomi's complexion drained to a sickly, pasty gray. Mom covered her face, stifling a pained whimper. "Furthermore," Dalton stated, his voice gaining volume, 8 months before his death, Mr. Ellington hired a private investigator to document any attempts to manipulate, coerce, or interfere with his estate planning or with his daughter Grace. He pushed a stack of papers, copies of bank statements, detailed meeting logs, and transcribed text messages, across the table. The investigator gathered substantial evidence demonstrating Naomi Ellington's efforts to pressure her father into altering his will, including unauthorized withdrawals totaling $50,000 from a joint family account during his illness. Mr. Thorne, Naomi's attorney, finally spoke, his voice tight. "We were not informed of this investigation." "You were not required to be," Dalton replied calmly. The investigation additionally documented Ms. Naomi Ellington's consultations with 3 separate estate planning firms, discussions explicitly concerning how to challenge the inheritance, and the specific purchase and delivery tracking of a DNA testing kit mailed to Ms. Ellington's home address and subsequently gift-wrapped. Naomi's eyes were wide with terror. "That's ridiculous. That was a joke," she stammered, her voice shaking violently. Dalton ignored her, setting down the final document, a single sheet of paper in my father's familiar, elegant script. "Mr. Ellington requested that I read this aloud." He unfolded the page. "Naomi, I know what you've been planning. I watched you try to manipulate your mother and your sister. I hoped, despite everything, that you would choose differently. These consequences are entirely your own doing." A sound, part gasp, part animalistic growl, escaped Naomi's throat. Mr. Thorne leaned into her urgently. "Do not contest this," he hissed. "There's an ironclad no-contest clause. You will lose everything." But years of entitlement had rendered Naomi incapable of rationality. "This is fraud," she shrieked. "She manipulated him. She tricked a dying man." Sarah stood, her voice measured and lethal. "The will explicitly details Mr. Ellington's knowledge of Grace's parentage and clearly sets forth his rationale for the distribution. Any contest will be deemed frivolous and trigger the no contest clause, which specifically mandates the immediate repayment of all outstanding personal loans from the estate, totaling approximately $200,000. "That's not a loan. He gave me that money," Naomi screamed. "Not according to the estate's detailed records," Dalton reiterated, unperturbed. Mom finally broke her silence, her voice a fragile, defeated whisper. "Naomi, stop." But Naomi was spiraling, her lifetime of assumed superiority collapsing around her. "This should be mine. All of it. I'm the real daughter." I rose slowly, my voice steady, cutting through the chaos. "You didn't stay, Naomi. You controlled. You threatened. You built your life on secrets you never earned the right to keep." Dalton waited for the silence to return, then opened a smaller, personalized envelope addressed solely to me. "Grace," he read aloud, "there is one more item your father left you." Inside was a short, handwritten letter. "Grace, you spent your life believing you were invisible. You were not. I saw your strength, your quiet kindness, your unquestionable integrity, and the grace you showed under pressure. You were my daughter, not by blood, but by choice, and I leave you my legacy with absolute certainty that you will honor it." My vision blurred. I looked at Naomi. The rage had finally faded, replaced by a devastating realization. Her own father had engineered her downfall using the very weapon she had tried to deploy against me. It was her defeat, meticulously crafted by the man she had underestimated most. The legal fallout was swift. Mr. Thorne withdrew from the case the next morning. When Naomi attempted to contest the will anyway, the judge dismissed the filing immediately, citing the overwhelming evidence of undue influence presented by the estate's private investigation. The no contest clause was triggered. Her small beneficiary amount vanished. The $200,000 became instantly due, and she was given a strict deadline to repay the $50,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. For the first time in her life, Naomi looked truly small, cornered by consequences she could not outrun. A week later, Mom came to my small apartment in Austin. She sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, tears finally falling. She told me the complete truth about my biological father, the decades-old agreement made to save the family's reputation, and the crushing guilt she had carried. I listened to everything, but I didn't reach for her. "I believe you," I finally said. "But making things right starts with letting me live without carrying your secrets and your fear for the rest of my life." In the months that followed, I executed my role as the primary heir with Sarah's calm guidance. I managed the estate, settled the accounts, and finally made my own choice. A final, deliberate departure from the Ellington orbit. I sold the Denver house, a beautiful building that held too many cold memories, and moved to Oregon. There, where the lies and the quiet cruelty couldn't reach me, I built a new, simple life. It was the first time I made a choice without wondering who I might disappoint. I left the toxicity behind, choosing peace over a pain that had defined my entire childhood. If you have ever been the overlooked one, know this: you deserve better than the people who failed to see you.